Pass the gravy to someone who actually contributes, Brittany said, sliding the boat past my plate. And you, useless old woman, go wait in the kitchen with the help. The table laughed. Not loud, comfortable. The easy laugh of people who had said worse before and never once paid for it. They thought I was a burden. What none of them knew was that the house we were sitting in, the lease on Brittany's pretty little boutique, the mortgage, even the wine in their glasses, all of it floated on a single trust that opened for exactly one signature, mine. And before the pie was cut that night, a knock at the front door would teach every laughing face at that table whose name was on the paper. I set my fork down, squared it against the rim of the plate without thinking, the way your hands learn after 30 years of standing inspection. I did not raise my voice. People like Brittany mistake quiet for nothing. It is a common mistake, and an expensive one. I don't get loud. I get accurate. My name is Carol Brennan. I am 66 years old. For 3 decades, I wore the uniform of the United States Army, logistics and intelligence, and I retired a full colonel. 3 years ago, I buried my husband, Walt, in the cemetery on Harmar Hill, where you can see the whole river bend below you. Since the morning we lowered him into that ground, I had been the woman at the end of the table everybody talked over. Every quarter an envelope came to my mailbox with one word typed on the front. Discretionary. Every quarter I signed it. And every quarter the people laughing in that dining room spent what my signature turned loose. And not one of them ever asked what the word meant. I let them not ask. That was my mistake. And I was about to stop making it. 3 hours earlier, I had parked my Buick on Putnam Street with a pumpkin pie cooling on a towel on the passenger seat. I made it myself, from a real pie pumpkin, the way Walt liked it. Old habit. You cook for the people you have, even after the people you have stopped seeing you. Marietta, Ohio. Where the Muskingum slides into the Ohio River, brick streets, a courthouse with a green dome, the Lafayette Hotel down on Front Street strung with lights for the holiday. It is the kind of town that still keeps the good china for company and the folding chairs in the garage for the overflow. The house up on Harmar Hill, white with black shutters, was the house Walt and I bought in 1986. David and Brittany lived in it now. The deed had Brittany's taste all over it and somebody else's money underneath it. David opened the door. My son. 40 years old, soft around the eyes the way his father never was. He hugged me the careful way you hug a relative you are hoping will not stay long. Mom, you make the drive okay? I made the drive okay, David. It's 9 miles. In the front hall, on the sideboard under a stack of decor magazines, sat a folder from Brittany's shop. Larkin Linen, 2 blocks off Front Street. The boutique she put on the internet more than she put in the bank. I was not snooping. I have a habit older than my son. I read what is said in front of me. Top page, an invoice from a linen supplier in Columbus. $14,200. And clipped right behind it, the same invoice, same number, same date. Billed a second time, doubled. I did not say a word. I filed it where I file things and carried my pie to the kitchen. The table was set for 9, Brittany at the head in a cream sweater that cost more than my monthly check, holding court. Her mother, Diane, down from Akron, pearls and opinions. A couple from the country club, the Lawsons, who Brittany collected the way some people collect throw pillows. David at the foot, me, near the kitchen door where the draft came through, in a folding chair from the garage because, Brittany explained brightly, the good chairs only went 8. Carol, you don't mind, she said. It was not a question. I don't mind, I said. I had sat in worse chairs in worse places. A folding chair in a warm house is no hardship. I have slept standing up in the back of a transport, over country I am still not allowed to name. The talk ran the way it always ran. The boutique's big season. The trip to Charleston they were planning for March. The kitchen they wanted to redo. The quartz, the second oven. Money talk, all of it, from people who had never once asked where the money actually came from. "We're thinking spring for the renovation," Brittany told the Lawsons, "if the distribution clears." Diane patted her daughter's hand. "It always clears, honey. It always clears." I buttered a roll and said nothing. They talked about my husband's trust the way you talk about the weather. Something that happens to you. Something owed. Mrs. Lawson, trying to be kind, leaned toward me. "And what do you do with your time now, Carol?" Before I could open my mouth, Brittany answered for me. "Mom-in-law's retired, very retired. She mostly rests." A little laugh, and the Lawsons laughed with her because they did not know what else to do. "We help her out. It's a lot, honestly. But family is family. We help her out." I felt the old heat climb the back of my neck, and I let it cool before it reached my face. 30 years of teaching young officers to hold their tongue until the facts are on their side is good for something. David could have spoken then. He knew exactly what I had been. He looked at his plate and reached for his water. "David," I said, quiet. "You want to tell them what your mother did in the army?" The whole table turned to him, smiling, ready for a nice little story. He moved his fork an inch. "Mom did, logistics, supply, paperwork mostly. Real important stuff." He said it the way you'd describe a hobby. Paperwork. 3 decades, 3 combat theaters, and a clearance most of the men at that table could not have spelled. Folded down into paperwork by my own son, who could not look at me while he did it. That was when Brittany reached for the gravy. She slid the boat past my plate, slow so the guests could enjoy it. The kitchen. The help. The word useless landing hard on the front, like she had practiced it in the mirror. The table laughed the same comfortable laugh. I set my fork down and squared it. No noise. None. I stood. I picked up my own plate, because you carry your own plate, and I walked the 8 feet to the kitchen and set it beside the sink. Behind me, the talk closed back up over the silence. Easy, like a door swinging shut on a draft. David followed me in. Of course he did. 40 years old and still hoping somebody else would fix the thing he broke. "Mom, she didn't mean it like that. She meant it exactly like that, David." I turned the tap to warm and let the water run over my hands. "It's all right. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed tonight." He frowned. He didn't understand that, and I didn't expect him to. Not yet. My purse hung on the back of the kitchen chair, and inside it, against the lining, there was a letter. Walt sealed it the winter before he passed and wrote across the front in his hard block print, the same print that had signed 30 years of my life. "When they forget who you are, remind them whose name is on the paper." I had carried it 3 years and never broken the seal. Standing at that sink, with the laughter coming through the wall, I thought, maybe Walt knew this exact night was coming. Maybe he had seen Brittany clearer than I ever let myself. I don't get loud. I get accurate. And I had been accurate my whole life. I just hadn't aimed it at my own family before. I dried my hands on the dish towel and folded it over the oven handle, corners square. That is when the knock came. 3 of them. Hard even, spaced the way a man knocks when somebody taught him how to do it. Not the doorbell. The door itself, knuckles on wood, loud enough to cut clean through the dining room and into the kitchen where they'd sent me. The laughing stopped. All of it. At once. I heard Brittany's chair scrape the floor. I heard her heels cross the hall. I heard the front door pull open, and then a young man's voice, clear and certain and carrying, asked one question into that suddenly silent house. Good evening, ma'am. We're looking for Colonel Brennan. For a moment, nobody in that house moved. I stood at the sink with the dish towel folded over the oven handle and listened to the quiet I had spent 30 years learning to read. There is a silence that means a room is confused, and a silence that means a room is afraid, and a silence that means a room has just understood it got something badly wrong. This was the third kind. It came down over the dining room the way fog comes down over the Muskingum on a cold morning, all at once, and from any distance you would never have known there were people underneath it at all. "I'm sorry," Brittany said at the door. The bright was gone out of her voice. I had never once heard it leave before. "There's no colonel here. This is the Brennan house, but I think you have the wrong address." "This is the Brennan residence," the young man said. Polite, easy, not moving an inch. "We're here for Colonel Carol Brennan, United States Army, retired. We were told she would be at this address for the holiday, ma'am." I heard a chair shift in the dining room. Diane, half rising to get a look. I heard one of the Lawsons murmur something low, the way people do when they want to pretend they are not hanging on every word. "Carol," Brittany said. "She said my name the way you'd name a thing you found stuck to the bottom of your shoe. There's some mistake. Carol is my mother-in-law. She was in the army, but she did paperwork. Supply. She isn't a colonel. Ma'am." There was a small change in the young man now, a cooling, the way the air shifts right before the weather does. "Colonel Carol Brennan, 30 years of service. If she is in the house, we would be grateful if you would tell her Captain Reyes is at the door." I dried my hands. They were steady. They had been steady in worse doorways than this one, in places where the knock meant something a great deal heavier than a holiday interruption. I lifted my purse off the back of the kitchen chair, because a soldier does not walk off and leave her kit behind, and I came out of the kitchen they had sent me to. The hall ran straight from the dining room to the front door. Brittany stood holding the door open with one hand, frozen there in her cream sweater, and past her shoulder, out on the porch under the lights she had strung for the company, stood the two of them. Dress uniform. Both of them. The dark blue with the gold on the sleeve, creased so sharp you could have shaved with it, covers held square under the left arm. The older one in front, a captain, maybe 35, with a face that gave away exactly nothing. Behind him a younger man, a sergeant, broad through the shoulders, eyes forward. Two men who had driven God knows how far on a holiday and stood on a stranger's porch with their backs straight as plumb lines. I stepped into the hall light. What happened then I will carry to Harmar Hill myself someday. Captain Reyes saw me. I do not mean he glanced at me. I mean he found me, the way you find the one familiar thing in a crowded room, and something moved behind his eyes that I had not seen aimed at me in 3 years. He came to attention. The heels came together with a sound like a door closing. The sergeant a half second behind him, snapping in tight beside him, and both of those young men brought their hands up in a salute so clean, so square, so absolutely correct, that the air in that hallway seemed to change pressure. "Colonel Brennan," Captain Reyes said. "Ma'am, it's an honor. I have been saluted 10,000 times, on parade grounds in the heat, in hangars, on a tarmac in the dark with the engines screaming and a flag-draped case coming down a ramp. It never once stopped meaning something, but I had not been saluted since the day I took the uniform off, and standing in my own son's hallway in a cardigan and my flat church shoes, with a pumpkin pie cooling on the kitchen counter, it went through me like current through wire. Behind me, in the dining room, I heard a fork come down against good china and stop. Not set down. Stopped. Halfway. The way a hand stops when the brain forgets to finish the order. David. I knew it was David without turning around. I knew the exact look on his face. because I had seen it on him as a boy the day he learned the dog had not, in fact, gone to live on a farm. I returned the salute. 30 years, and it still lived in my arm. The angle, the snap, the drop. "At ease, Captain," I said. "You drove a long way to ruin a perfectly good Thanksgiving." The corner of his mouth moved. "Yes, ma'am." Couldn't be helped. Nobody else in that house made a sound. Diane was on her feet now, one hand on her pearls. Mrs. Lawson had turned all the way around in her chair. Mr. Lawson was looking at his wife as if she might explain it. And Brittany, still holding the door, had gone a color I do not have a good word for, a sort of paper white with 2 spots of red high on the cheeks, like a doll left out in the cold. "I don't understand," Brittany said. Quiet now. Almost to herself. "She does paperwork." Captain Reyes heard her. He did not look at her. He kept his eyes on me, which was its own kind of answer, and that, more than the salute, was the thing that finally landed in that room. These were not lost men. They had not stumbled onto the wrong porch. They knew exactly whose house this was, and exactly who I was, and they had no interest whatsoever in the woman holding the door. "Colonel," he said, "I'm sorry to come at you cold on the holiday. We tried the number we had on file. It rang to a machine that wasn't taking messages. The number on file, my old number, the one that rang in this house now, because 2 years ago, after Walt passed, Brittany had folded my accounts into the household ones to make it simpler for everybody. And somewhere in that simplifying, my phone had become her phone, and I had let it happen. Because grief makes you small and agreeable, and you do not notice the doors being quietly shut until you go to walk through one. I filed that thought where I file things. Another invoice. Another line that did not add up. "You've got me now," I said. "What's this about, Captain?" He reached inside the breast of his jacket and brought out an envelope, heavy stock, cream-colored, and across the front in real engraving. Not a printer, a seal, I knew. The hall light caught the gold of it. He held it out to me with both hands, the way you hand over something that matters. "The department is dedicating the new Logistics and Intelligence Operations Center at the end of next month, ma'am," he said. "December 19th. A portion of the program you ran has been cleared for public recognition. They're naming the operations wing for the officer who built it." The hall was very quiet. "There aren't a lot of people left who can stand up at that podium and say what that work was, Colonel," he said. "You're the one they want to do it. We were sent to deliver the invitation by hand and to tell you that an escort will come for you on the day. It would be the honor of my career to be that escort, ma'am, if you'll have me." I took the envelope. It had weight to it, real weight, the way a thing has when somebody decided it should not be cheap. My name was on the front. Not Carol, not mom-in-law. Colonel Carol Brennan in that hard engraved hand, and under it 3 letters and a string of words that 2 of the people in that dining room had laughed about 3 hours ago over the gravy. "The officer who built it," I said. "Yes, ma'am." I have stood at attention while a general pinned things to my chest and felt less than I felt holding that envelope in my son's hallway. Not because of the building. Buildings are concrete. Because for 30 years I had done work that no one at this table was ever going to be allowed to know about. Work I could not explain to my own husband past a certain door, and I had made my peace long ago with the idea that it would stay in the dark with me. And now 2 young men had driven through the holiday to stand on a porch and tell me the dark had let a little of it go. "Thank you, Captain Reyes," I said. "I'll be there." "Yes, ma'am." He put his cover back on, squared it, and the sergeant did the same. "We'll confirm the details. December 19th. His eyes moved once, just once, off me and across the frozen dining room behind me, the table set for 9, the cream sweater, the pearls, the country club faces all turned and gaping. He took it all in the way an experienced man takes in a room in a single, unhurried pass, and whatever he made of it, he kept to himself. Then he looked back at me, and lower, just for me, he said, "It's good to finally meet you, Colonel. We've heard about you our whole careers. Half of us didn't think you were real." Then they were down the steps and gone into the cold, and the porch light swung a little in the wind off the river, and Brittany was still holding the door open to the November night, letting all the heat out of the house she did not pay to warm. She shut it. Slowly. She turned around, and for the first time in 2 years, my daughter-in-law looked at me as though she were actually seeing a person standing there. "Carol," she said. The word came out careful. "You should have said something about all that. You let us think you just did, you know." Filing. "You never asked me anything, Brittany," I said. "There was no heat in it. I did not need any, not once in 6 years. You decided what I was the day you met me, and you've been very comfortable ever since." David had finally gotten out of his chair. He came to the edge of the dining room, white as the tablecloth, and he opened his mouth. And what came out was the smallest thing a 40-year-old man has ever said. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't, David." That much was the plain truth. "Most of it I still can't. But you didn't need a clearance to treat your mother like she was worth a chair at the table. You just needed to want to." Diane was talking now, fast and bright, papering over the silence. "Oh, how wonderful. A building. Isn't that something we had no idea? You must be so proud, Brittany. Did you know, isn't it just remarkable?" And the Lawsons were nodding too fast, and somebody refilled a wineglass to have something to do with their hands. The dinner did not so much resume as collapse back into motion, everyone pretending the last 5 minutes could be smoothed over with enough pie. I did not stay for pie. I picked my coat up off the bench in the hall and I put it on, and I put Captain Reyes's envelope into the inside pocket, the same pocket where Walt's sealed letter had ridden against my heart for 3 years. The two pieces of paper sat there together, his and theirs, and I felt the shape of them through the wool. "You're not leaving," Brittany said. It came out almost like a plea, which I had also never heard from her. She had understood something in the last few minutes, the way an animal understands weather before the mind catches up. She did not yet know what. "We haven't even the pie. Carol, stay." "It's 9 miles, Brittany," I said. "I'll be fine." I drove home along the river with the heater ticking and the courthouse dome lit up green over Marietta and the lights of the Lafayette strung bright down on Front Street, and I did not feel triumphant, whatever you might think. I felt tired, the specific clean tiredness of a thing that has finally started to move after sitting still too long. Because here is what the salute had shaken loose in me. Somewhere on Putnam Street, with the engine cold. For 3 years, I had signed a one-word envelope every quarter and handed those people the means to live the lives they lived. And I had told myself it was love and family and what Walt would have wanted. And tonight, watching Brittany's face try to recalculate the entire value of a woman she had filed under useless, I understood that I had not the faintest idea anymore what I was actually signing, what the boutique drew, what the mortgage took, where it went, and how much, and whether the numbers on those quarterly pages had any honest relationship to the numbers I assumed. I had spent a career making sure that columns added up before I put my name to anything, and the one set of books I had never once audited was my own. That stopped tonight. When I got home, I did not go to bed. I turned on the lamp in Walt's study, the room I still called Walt's study, and I knelt down at the bottom drawer of the oak file cabinet where the trust papers had lived since the day they were drawn, and I pulled the whole folder out and set it on the desk under the light. 3 years of quarterly statements. every discretionary envelope I had ever signed without reading, photocopied and filed by an attorney who was more careful than I had been. I put on my glasses and I started, the way I had taught 100 young officers to start, at the top, with the dates. The dates were the first thing that lied to me. I lined the statements up across Walt's desk in order, 12 of them, 3 years of quarters, and I squared the edges the way I square anything I mean to trust. Then I set a legal pad beside them and took up a pencil, because a pencil tells the truth about how often a person changes her mind, and I began to build the column I should have built 36 months ago. Income in, distributions out, balance carried forward. The lamp threw its yellow circle on the blotter, and out past the window, the Muskingum was a black ribbon with the Williamstown bridge lights laid across it, and the house was so quiet I could hear the furnace decide to come on. For the first hour it was only arithmetic, and arithmetic is decent company. The trust took in what Walt had built it to take in, the careful conservative things, and it paid out what I had told it to pay out each quarter when I signed the envelope that said discretionary across the flap in that same hard engraved hand. I had always pictured one number on the far side of that flap, a modest figure. The little help a mother hands across because she can and because the boy is hers. That is what assuming is. It is initialing the cover sheet and trusting the pages underneath, because the people who slid them in front of you carry your son's last name. The pages underneath did not match the picture in my head. I found the mortgage first. Not a mention of a mortgage. The mortgage itself, the whole monthly note on the big house with the strung porch lights 9 miles back across the river, paid in full out of the trust, routed quarterly, every quarter, for 3 years running. I sat with that a moment. David had told me at Walt's funeral, with his hand on my shoulder and his eyes wet, that he and Brittany had finally gotten themselves on solid ground, that the boutique was carrying them now, that I was not to worry about a thing. I had been proud of him. I had driven home from the cemetery on Harmer Hill that day actually proud, thinking, there, Walt, he landed on his feet after all. He had not landed on anything. He had landed on this, on a line item with my initials beside it. I did not get loud. There was no one in the house to be loud at, and that has never been my way regardless. I don't get loud. I get accurate. I wrote the figure down, underlined it once, and moved to the next page. The boutique was worse, and the boutique was where the numbers stopped being a household and started being a chart. Lark and Linen had opened with a single capitalization draw, a respectable sum, the kind of stake a family stakes a young woman who has a dream and good taste, and a storefront 2 blocks off Front Street with the brick freshly pointed. That was the first quarter. I remembered signing it. I had been glad to. But the second draw was larger, and the third larger than the second, and by the time I had laid the pencil tip down the left margin and connected them, what I was looking at was not a business finding its legs. It was the opposite shape. It was the shape of something bleeding from somewhere it would not show you and being topped off, quarter after quarter, from the only vein that stayed open. A store that is making money does not need more of yours every 90 days. It needs less. These draws climbed like a fever chart. And then I found the invoice, and the invoice was the moment my hands went cold, in a way the river chill had nothing to do with. I had seen it 3 hours earlier, on the sideboard at the big house, while I was carrying the green bean dish out to the kitchen they had banished me to. There had been a folder of Brittany's boutique paperwork, left open next to the cranberry mold. The careless way she left everything, certain no one in that house could read anything that mattered. My eye had crossed it the way my eye crosses any ledger. Out of 30 years of habit I cannot switch off, and it had snagged on a number. An order for Belgian flax linen, Invoice 4471, $6,200. I had not meant to memorize it. I never mean to. It simply stays, the way a wrong note stays in a musician's ear. I had filed it and carried the green beans in and said nothing, because that is what I do. I catch the thing, and I keep the thing, and I wait. Here it was now, in the trust. Invoice 4471, $6,200, paid out of the discretionary draw in the spring quarter. And here it was again. Invoice 4471, $6,200, paid out of the discretionary draw the following autumn. Same number, same amount, same vendor. Billed twice, 2 quarters apart, to the trust, and paid both times, because the woman signing was an old fool in a cardigan who only ever read the flap. I sat back in Walt's chair and I let the furnace run, and I understood, finally and completely, that I had been audited for 3 years by a 34-year-old who had decided on the day she met me that I could not count. That was the part that almost made me laugh. Sitting there alone at 1 in the morning with my glasses pushed up into my gray hair. Of all the rooms in all the world to decide, the woman across the table could not handle numbers. She had picked the one with a logistics kernel in it. She had looked at 30 years of moving fuel and parts and people and intelligence across an ocean on a budget that had to balance, or men did not come home, and she had seen a cardigan, and she had relaxed. I worked until the courthouse dome went from lit to gray with the dawn coming up over Front Street, and when I was done, I had 2 pages of legal pad in pencil and a single sentence in my head, and the sentence was not angry. It was a requisition. I needed to read the trust itself, not the statements the trust generated, the instrument, the actual paper Walt and the lawyer had drawn the autumn before he passed, the one I had signed in grief with my eyes swimming and filed in the bottom drawer and never once opened since. I needed to know, in the founding language, exactly what my signature was and was not. Because somewhere in the last 6 hours, the question had stopped being how much. It had become who decides. Raymond Tate had been Walt's attorney for 20 years, and he kept Saturday hours, which is the kind of thing that survives in a town like this and almost nowhere else. His office was up on 2nd Street above what used to be the pharmacy, a narrow set of stairs and a frosted glass door with his name on it in gold that needed redoing. He took one look at me when I came in with the folder under my arm, and he did not say good morning. He said, "Carol, sit down. You found something." "I've found 3 years of something, Ray," I said. "I need you to read me the clause, the discretionary one, out of the trust, not out of my memory." He went to his cabinet and he came back with the original, the heavy one, the blue-backed copy with the ribbon, and he put on his own glasses, and he found the page without hunting, which told me he had read it more recently than I had. He turned it so I could follow, and he read it aloud, the way you read something you want to be sure lands cleanly, one word set down after another, like coins on a counter. "Distributions of income and principal," Raymond Tate read, "shall be made to or for the benefit of the beneficiaries solely at the discretion of the trustee. The trustee's determination shall be final and binding. There is no entitlement, fixed or implied, in any beneficiary to any distribution." He looked at me over the top of the glasses. "And the trustee, Carol, is you, sole." Walt was specific about that. He sat in that chair you're in, and he was specific. I had built that program. I want you to understand what went through me, hearing it. Not triumph, something quieter and harder. For 3 years I had been signing those envelopes as if I were a clerk processing a payment that someone else was owed. I had it backwards. There was no owed. There was never any owed. Walt had built the whole structure so that nothing in it flowed by right. so that every dollar that ever crossed to that house and that boutique crossed because I, and only I, looked at the page and chose to let it. He had handed me a faucet and told the world it was a fountain. And he had done it, I understood now, 3 years too early to be a coincidence. In the same autumn, he started getting tired in the afternoons. He had seen something I had been too kind to see. He had seen Brittany clearly across his own dinner table, and he had quietly built me a wall. "There's one more thing," Raymond said, and his voice changed, and I knew before he reached for the second folder that the night was not over after all. "It came in the spring. I flagged it for you. I was told you were handling it." He laid it in front of me. It was from People's Bank, the branch down on Putnam, addressed to the trustee of the Brennan Family Trust. It was a request for the trustee's written acknowledgement and consent. Consent to what? It took me one slow read to absorb, and then the cold that had started at the invoice finished its work all the way down my spine. An assignment. Brittany had taken out a personal loan, a substantial one, in her own name, and she had pledged as collateral the future distributions of the Brennan Family Trust. She had borrowed against my faucet. She had walked into a bank on Putnam Street and put up, as the thing they could seize if she failed, money that did not flow by right, money that flowed only if an old woman in a cardigan chose to sign, and she had represented to that bank, in a line I read 3 times to be sure of it, that those distributions were expected and ongoing. "I never consented to this, Ray," I said. "I never saw it." "I know that now," he said. "She told my office you were aware, that it was a formality. I sent the acknowledgement for your signature and it never came back, and the matter sat the way matters sit." He took his glasses off. "Carol, I pulled what I could before you got here this morning. The loan was for working capital. Larkin Linen. The store isn't soft. The store is underwater, has been for the better part of a year. The draws you've been signing weren't growing a business. They were the only thing between her and the bottom. And when the draws stopped looking like enough, she went and borrowed against the next ones. Against money she does not control and never did." I sat in Raymond Tate's office above the old pharmacy with the Saturday light coming through the frosted glass, and the whole shape of it finally stood up in front of me, complete. And it was so much larger and so much colder than a rude word over the gravy that I had to set my hand flat on his desk a moment. The burden line. "Go wait in the kitchen with the help." I had spent the drive home thinking that was cruelty. The ordinary garden cruelty of a woman who thinks she has outgrown you. It was not cruelty. It was accounting. To Brittany, I was not a person who could be insulted. I was an instrument that had to keep producing, and you do not flatter an instrument. You do not seat it at the table. You do not ask after its day. You keep it in the kitchen, you keep it quiet, and you keep it signing. Her whole curated life, the storefront and the porch lights, and the cream sweater and the pearls, every bit of it was a single leveraged bet. And the thing she had bet on, the asset underwriting the entire performance, was my compliance, my not reading the flap. She had no idea I had read the flap. That was the part Raymond could not see, watching my face, and I did not tell him yet. I simply sat with it. This enormous quiet advantage. The way you sit with high ground before anyone knows you hold it. She thought the books were closed. She thought Thursday had gone exactly her way. Give or take 2 soldiers she had not been able to make sense of and had surely already explained to herself as a mix-up. She did not know that the soldiers had been real, and she did not know what they had shaken loose, and she did not know that 9 miles away, an old woman she had filed under useless had spent the night turning her entire architecture into 2 pages of pencil. I drove back across the river slow, past the Lafayette with its flags out, past the boats wrapped for winter, And I had just put the kettle on at home when the phone rang. My phone, the real one. The cell I had quietly opened a new line on that very morning at the counter while Raymond pulled his files. Because a person who has just learned her old number rings in someone else's kitchen does not keep using it. Only Raymond had this number. I let it ring twice and answered. It was not Raymond. It was David, and David's voice had the careful, managed brightness of a man reading from a script his wife had written for him at the kitchen island. Mom. Hi. Listen. About Thursday, we all feel just terrible about how that went. The mix-up at the door and everything. A pause. The sound of him being watched. Brittany thinks, we think, it'd be good to all sit down, about the trust, clear the air, get everybody on the same page going into the new year. She's been wanting to formalize the distribution schedule anyway, so it's predictable, so there's no more confusion. Raymond can come. We were thinking the 19th. The 19th. December 19th. The day Captain Reyes was sending an escort to my door. I held the phone and looked out at the gray river, and I did not let one thing show in my voice, because I don't get loud, and because the most accurate thing in the world is silence held one beat longer than the other person expects. The 19th works, I said. Tell Brittany I'll be there, and David. Have her bring everything. The 19th came in cold and clear over Marietta, the kind of December light that lays a hard shine on the river and makes you squint coming down off Harmer Hill. I drove across the bridge with the heater ticking and my purse on the seat beside me. And inside the purse was the legal pad with its 2 pencil pages, and underneath the legal pad was the envelope Walt had sealed 3 autumns ago and asked me to carry. I had carried it the way you carry a thing you do not expect to need. I had needed it for weeks now. I had simply been waiting for a table to set it on. The big house had its lights up for the season, the porch and the eaves traced in white, lit even in daylight because Brittany believed a house should perform around the clock. The folding chairs were out. I knew those chairs. They lived in the garage the other 50 weeks of the year, and they came out for an audience, and an audience is what she had assembled. I counted 6 cars besides David's truck. She had brought people. She had brought, I understood, walking up the cleared path with my purse on my arm, witnesses to my agreeing. She meant for the room to watch the old woman nod. Raymond Tate was already inside, his blue-backed folder square on the long table, his glasses in his breast pocket. He did not get up to fuss over me, which was his kindness. He simply caught my eye once across the room, a small, steady look, the look of a man who has read every page and is ready when you are. Brittany ran it like a meeting because she had decided a meeting was a thing she ran. She wore the cream sweater and the pearls, and she stood at the head of her own table with a leather binder open in front of her, and she thanked everyone for coming as if the gravy and the kitchen and Thursday had happened to some other family in some other house. David sat at her right with his hands flat on the wood, not looking at me, looking at the grain. We just want everything clear and fair going into the new year, Brittany said, and she smiled the smile she used on customers. Carol, we love you, and that's exactly why we think it's time we put the trust on a real schedule. A set number, every quarter, written down so nobody has to wonder and nobody has to ask. We've actually planned our whole year around it. The store, the house, all of it. So it'd just be so much easier for everybody if it was, automatic. There it was, laid on her own table by her own hand, in front of her own guests. We have planned our whole year around it. She thought she was describing security. She was describing dependence, out loud, to a room. I folded my hands and said nothing, because the most useful thing I own is the half-second other people cannot stand to leave empty. And Brittany has never in her life been able to leave one empty. So if we could just get your signature on the schedule today, she went on, sliding a printed page down the table toward me, the way she had once slid a gravy boat past my plate, we can all stop worrying about it. Before anyone signs anything, I said, and my voice was level and low and it carried the length of that table without my lifting it an inch. I'd like Raymond to read one paragraph from the document itself, not the schedule you printed, the trust. Brittany's smile held, but something behind it shifted its weight. Of course, she said, because she could not say no in front of the chairs. Raymond put on his glasses. He found the page without searching, and he read the way he reads, each word set down clean, like coins counted onto a counter. Distributions of income and principal, he read, shall be made to or for the benefit of the beneficiaries solely at the discretion of the trustee. The trustee's determination shall be final and binding. There is no entitlement, fixed or implied, in any beneficiary to any distribution. He lowered the page. The trustee, he said, is Carol Brennan. Sole. Mr. Brennan was very specific. The room got quiet in a way Brittany's rooms were never allowed to get quiet. One of the guests, a woman in a holiday red blazer, looked down at her own hands. David closed his eyes for a moment, and I understood that some part of him had always known, had known at the funeral with his wet eyes and his hand on my shoulder, and had simply decided not to. Okay, Brittany said, and her voice came back harder, recalibrated, the customer's smile gone. Okay, so technically it's discretionary, but Walt clearly meant for it to take care of his family. That's the whole point of a family trust. You don't just get to decide one day to cut everyone off because your feelings got hurt at dinner. No, I agreed. I don't decide on feelings. I reached into my purse and I took out the first page of the legal pad, and I laid it on the table and turned it so the woman in the red blazer could read it too, because Brittany had wanted witnesses, and I am not a person who wastes a resource. I decide on the pages. Invoice 4471, Belgian flax linen, $6,200, paid out of this trust in the spring quarter. I moved my finger down one line. Invoice 4471, Belgian flax linen, $6,200, paid out of this trust again in the autumn. Same invoice, same amount, same vendor, billed twice, paid twice. By me, because I trusted the flap of the envelope and did not read the pages underneath. I looked up at her then for the first time, and I kept my face still. I read the pages now, Brittany. I read all of them. The mortgage on this house, paid in full out of the trust, every quarter for 3 years. The same 3 years you told me at the cemetery. You were finally standing on your own. David made a small sound. He had not known that part, or had let himself not know it, and now he could not unknow it with the chairs all watching. And then, I said, and I nodded to Raymond, because this was the one I wanted in his voice, and not mine. There's the bank. Raymond opened his blue folder and drew out a single sheet, and he read the heading flat. People's Bank, Putnam Street. A personal loan in the name of Brittany Brennan, working capital, and an assignment pledging as collateral the future distributions of the Brennan Family Trust, represented to the bank as expected and ongoing. He set it down beside my legal pad so the two papers touched. Distributions, Carol, that flow only at your sole discretion. She borrowed against a faucet she does not control, and told the bank it was a guaranteed stream. It was very quiet. Brittany had gone the particular pale of a person watching the floor of her own story drop out from under her shoes. She had built everything on the one assumption that the woman across the table could not count, and she had walked into the single room in Marietta where that assumption could be taken apart line by line and handed back to her in front of the people she most wanted to impress. "You're going to ruin us," she said finally, and the word came out thin. Over a dinner. No, I said. Not over a dinner. I picked up the printed schedule she had slid down the table, the one with the line for my signature, and I set it back down without a mark on it. I'm not going to sign this quarter. Not this one, and not on a schedule, and not because I'm angry, because I'm not. I carried this for 3 years. I am only putting it down. I just stopped holding it up. And that was when the knock came. It was not the doorbell. It was a knock. 3 flat raps on the front door, firm and even, and the whole assembled room turned toward it as one, because some sounds carry their own weight. Brittany did not move. David rose halfway and then didn't. So I crossed the dining room myself, past the folding chairs, past the porch lights burning in the daylight, and I opened my son's front door. 2 soldiers stood on the step in dress uniform, the cold coming off their shoulders, their boots squared to the threshold. The older of the 2, a sergeant first class with gray at his temples and a row of ribbons I could read at a glance, looked at me and did not look past me into the house, which is how you know a man came for the person and not the address. "Ma'am," he said, "we're looking for Colonel Brennan." He said it like the rank was a fact older than the door. "Colonel Carol Brennan." "You found her, Sergeant," I said. Both men came to attention on the step, and they raised their hands in a salute so crisp it cut the cold, and they held it, the 2 of them, on a December porch in Harmar, while behind me in the dining room a leather binder slid off the table and a fork stopped somewhere short of a mouth, and nobody breathed. "Captain Reyes sends her respects, Colonel," the sergeant said, lowering his hand only when I returned it. "The record's been declassified, ma'am. After 30 years. The movement you planned, the field hospital and its people, the way you got them out across the line when the manuals said it couldn't be moved. They can finally put your name on it." He held out a heavy envelope with a seal I knew on it. "The department's dedicating the new Logistics Readiness Center at the installation in your honor this spring. We're your escort, Colonel. It would be ours to drive you to the ceremony." I stood in my son's doorway, and I felt 30 years stand up quietly behind me. All the nights of moving fuel and parts and people, and the things you carry that you do not get to say out loud. All of it sealed away so long that my own family had filled the silence with a cardigan and a kitchen and the word burden. The 2 soldiers on the step had read one line of a file the family never bothered to ask existed, and they had driven to Marietta to salute it. Behind me, Brittany had finally found her feet, gripping the back of a folding chair, her face working to assemble an expression for a situation that had no expression in her catalog. David was looking at me the way you look at a photograph you have walked past 1,000 times and never once seen. I took the envelope. Then I reached into my purse and took out the other one, Walt's, the one with my name in his hard engraved hand, and I broke the seal there in the doorway with the cold pouring in and the soldiers waiting and the whole house silent at my back. One card, one line in his writing. "When they forget who you are, remind them whose name is on the paper." I did not read it aloud. I had spent 30 years deciding what a room needed to hear and what it did not, and this room had heard enough. I put the card back along its fold. I told the sergeant I would be honored and that I would see him in the spring, and I asked the 2 of them to come in out of the cold, which they did, and which Brittany's careful house could do nothing to stop. The boutique 2 blocks off Front Street did not survive the winter. A bank that learns its collateral was a story, and not a guarantee does not wait politely. And within the month, a county notice was taped inside the front glass of the storefront with the freshly pointed brick, and a man on a stepladder was scraping the gold letters of Larkin linen off the window one curl of paint at a time, while the strung lights 2 blocks over still burned on a porch whose mortgage had just become real money, owed by real people who would have to learn, the way the rest of us learn, what a thing actually costs when no one is quietly underwriting it. I drove up Harmar Hill that same afternoon, before the light went, and I stood at Walt's stone where the grass was stiff with frost. I told him I had read the pages at last. I told him the boy had looked at me, finally, even if it took 2 soldiers on a porch to turn his head. I stood there a long while in the cold with the river laid out gray below me and the courthouse dome catching the last of the sun across the water. Snow held in the cut letters of his name. I folded his letter along its old crease and slipped it back inside my coat.